guess. Oh, thank you. It is.
Eleanor, I'm sorry.
Yes.
Can you step back because the owl was bringing up. You can stand in front of the smart board. Yep.
Stand in front of the smart board.
Yep.
Absolutely. It's sort of surreal that this is actually happening. Tonight is our very first real in-person meeting. We've certainly transitioned over COVID on online services, so it's really nice to see everyone here and the over 300 people that have registered for this event this evening online. So welcome. It is an honor to be back at Caring Kind as their CEO. I was here 25 years ago as a postgraduate intern, and this young man was my mentor and now friend. And I just am extremely happy to be here this evening and to be representing Caring Kind. It is a pleasure tonight to introduce Loraine this evening. Before I do so, I want to thank Nancy and Jeff Halis for their generosity to Caring Kind over the years. Not only in the recognition of their giving to Caring Kind, but also recognition of their sister as she cared for their mother with Alzheimer's disease in their journey. A brother recognizing a sister is really special. And it is we're actually standing in the Loraine Skolnick Training Center, which is incredibly special, and she'll share a little bit about that this evening. So enjoy. Comfort matters is something that is so important to the Alzheimer's journey. I was an operator in long-term care for 17, almost 18 years. And as I read all of the amazing work that this group of people have done for Caring Kind, I think this is just scratching the surface, and we'll hopefully be able to do a lot more in implementation. So thank you again, and welcome, Loraine.
Thank you for that beautiful introduction. After many years living in our home, my mother was at the end stage of her life. Over 12 years, slowly, gradually, her disease had taken her from us. Although I had set up an incredible support system for my mother in my own home with the most amazing help, we reached a certain point where I knew that we needed additional support. Recognizing that the options were limited, I contacted the local home hospice. After investigation to determine whether mom was dying, which as we know is very hard to do with Alzheimer's, they certified her for 6 months of home hospice care. Their goals were to help someone who was dying. 6 months went by and mom did not die. They questioned continuing care for her, but then she had a new crisis and was recertified. This pattern continued for the next 2 years. This process was so particularly difficult at those stages when I really needed some extra support for myself and to help my mother during those stages. The struggles for the patient and the family were so challenging. Hospice was helpful, but was often not exactly what we needed. What we intuitively knew we needed, but did not yet have the vocabulary for, was comfort care for my mother. That is why I am so personally proud of Caring Kind, which for the last 10 years has truly been at the forefront of all the important and innovative work in the field of palliative care for this population. And I am very personally so gratified on behalf of my entire family, and especially my late mother, to be here tonight for this special lecture in the ongoing series that bears her name, involved with this organization that truly cares for people with the kindness they deserve. I am thrilled to introduce the speaker tonight and on this very, very timely topic. Thank you very much for allowing me to share some of my thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you,
Jed.
Loraine. Thank you, Loraine. I'm gonna just reset a little bit here. I'm gonna help you with that. Got it. Where do you want to take it? Yeah, you there and you over here, and we're gonna just move it over. Okay, I think that should do it. Okay. Good. So, well, thank you, Doreen. Really helped set the tone for tonight's discussion. I'm Jed Levine. I'm the president emeritus of Caring Kind. And actually this week I will be here 32 years. So long haul. For those of you who are not familiar with Caring Kind, I encourage you to learn more about our programs of care and support that are available free of charge to everybody who needs them. And we're very excited because in addition to our core programs of support groups, education, helpline, education, and training, we're adding a whole host of new programs for people with early stage cognitive stimulation therapy and more. We'll be adding a program which we're actively recruiting for volunteers now for a program called MAP that will pair newly diagnosed individuals and their care partner, their support partner, with experienced former caregivers who are volunteering and will help kind of lead them through the journey of Alzheimer's and connect them to resources, provide emotional support, and also importantly, connect people to research trials, because we want to have more people participate in research. So you can find out more about all of our programs by going to our website, which is all on our material outside, caringkindnyc.org, or by calling the helpline at 646-744-2900, or by speaking to any of the staff who are standing in the back there. They'd be glad to answer any questions, or take a look at some of the materials on the table out front. So let me also say that it is really thrilling to have people in the room. And I am delighted that we have over 300 people who registered for tonight virtually. So we're kind of getting the best of both worlds. But you know, what we're talking about tonight is something that's so intrinsically and uniquely human, this experience. And I think by having this human exchange, whether face-to-face, over a screen, or in person, I think is an important way of communicating and connecting with each other around this somewhat difficult topic. I just want to also thank all of you who are here in the room for adhering to the CDC guidelines. And I say we follow the New York City Department of Health and the Broadway regulations. So I thank you for keeping your masks on in the room, and I really appreciate that. And I also want to acknowledge the Halis and Skolnick families for their long-standing and loyal support and their participation in the development of this series of lectures, which we've been doing for so many years. By the way, there's an archive of these lectures on our website, so you can take a look at those and on our YouTube channel. So we're here really to celebrate an achievement. After 10 years, we started this program in 2012, feels like a long time ago, of bringing a model of palliative care to residents in nursing homes here in New York City. And this approach, it was a challenge to put it together. We worked with 3 different nursing homes and their hospice partners. And there was a major research and evaluation component. It was a very, very massive project. And it has, so that's 10 years ago that we started it, and it's continued to have life and continued to grow and develop. The basic core approach of palliative care was our board of directors adopted it as a core principle of care several years ago. So it informs not only our work with residents and nursing homes, but it actually informs all of our training and all of our interactions, and helps us, gives us a lens through which we can see how do we achieve the best possible care for people with dementia at whatever stage they are. We're here to celebrate the publication of the guide, which you have on your chair. And So this is, the guide has already had an incredible reception from leaders in the field of palliative medicine, geriatrics, and dementia care, who are enthusiastically praising it. It's been distributed to a wide network, including the Center for the Advancement of Palliative Care, which has been a longtime partner of ours, the Geriatric Workforce Enhancement Programs, the New York State and New York City Ombudsman Network, and the National Long-Term Care Association. So, and more. So it's really getting out there, and we're getting a lot of wonderful feedback from it. So now it's my pleasure and honor to welcome and introduce our panelists. So you have their extensive bios on your seats, and I'm not going to go through them. And we've posted them in the chat room as well. So Tina Alonso, who comes to us from Arizona, from Phoenix, is the Director of Comfort Matters at the Beatitudes campus in Phoenix. Tina is the beating heart of this successful, simple, and elegant approach to care. She and her staff represent the essence of the program that you'll learn about tonight, promoting comfort in persons with dementia, their family members, and the staff who care for them. Of course, you know, the opposite of comfort is discomfort or distress, and that's what we want to avoid in all of our lives, but especially in those residents with dementia. And sitting next to me is Ann Wyatt, our palliative and residential care consultant, a good friend, of longstanding, a mentor, a local cheerleader for the program, who shepherded the project through her gentle persistence, which actually means nagging, to get it done, resulting in real organizational change and an approach to caring for persons with dementia in nursing homes that results in calm, compassionate, respectful care, letting the person with dementia lead the way in showing us what comfort means to them. So I'm going to start with Tina. So for people who are not familiar with Comfort Matters and with this palliative care approach, what are some of the kind of the foundational components of the program in 5 minutes or less?
No, we can make it shorter.
Uh-huh.
Really, comfort boils down to what the person would do for themselves if they could, and finding out what that is, and making sure that no matter where they are, if their care partner is a family member, if they're a paid caregiver in the home, if they live in assisted living or in a nursing home, that individual makes comfort the goal and tries to get as close to what they would do if they could do it for themselves. So that really is the essence of comfort. And it boils down to being able to sleep when you're tired, wake when you're refreshed, eat the things that make sense to you when they make sense, receiving care and assistance in a way that makes sense and is meaningful to you, having things that engage, enrich your life, and create joy, and really being part of a community that supports you at all levels. If your community is small or large, but really supports who you are.
Thank you. That does say it all. And how long has the Comfort Matters existed at Beatitudes? Can you tell us a little bit about the genesis of this? Why? What was the motivation?
So
really important. Yeah.
So Comfort Matters actually came into existence on April 1st, 1998.
Wow.
And it grew out of a desire to do better, to figure out how to best care for folks who were unable to tell us what they needed and what was important. And through this 24-year journey, we've had the pleasure of discovery from an evidence-based perspective, research, but also in learning individual stories from the people that we serve, pulling together a program that supports the person, supports their family, and supports staff who also need to know many intricate aspects of care and service for that person who is having trouble thinking.
Mm-hmm.
Probably the most important things that we learned in our journey is, number one, the part of our brain that says we're comfortable or we're not continues to function until we draw our last breath. that we are able to communicate with others, even when our words fail, through our actions. So actions speak loudly when the individual is comfortable and also when they experience discomfort. And finally, the part of our brain where our emotions are housed are also, that remains intact. So how you feel is much more important than how you think. And when we focus on how you feel, we have oh so many opportunities to create quality of life and well-being.
Thank you. Can you tell us a little more about how people communicate either that sense of being comfortable or the opposite?
I'm going to give you an example. So we can often tell when something doesn't work for somebody. So if we're trying to perhaps get them to eat their vegetables and meat, and it doesn't really work for them, they may refuse it. They may close their mouth, or they may like push it away or whatever. On the other hand, if we give them something that they enjoy, so maybe it's a piece of lemon pie, or it's a black and white cookie, or it's cannoli, those things may always ring true to the person, and they may gobble that up. They're clearly telling us what works and what doesn't. And what we know for people who have trouble thinking, because they have a form of dementia, going with them gets us much further than trying to convince them that maybe something they've eaten in the past that was good for them is something they should do.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Let me, yeah, I was just going to remind everybody that we do have the index cards on your chairs. So if you have questions, and Carol will be collecting those in a little bit. And for those of you who are online, you can put your questions in the chat room and they will be communicated to me magically by the scribe we have in the back, Dr. Ed Jessic, who will be sending them to me mysteriously. So, through technology. So, and you've taken on this challenge. You've been with this project from the very beginning. We wrote a comprehensive guide, a manual for nursing home and assisted living residential care providers. And then you took on this additional challenge of yet writing another guide. Who is the target audience and why did you take this on?
Well, I think that, you know, the best care, certainly in any kind of residential center, is going to work best when there's a real partnership between the family or friends and the people who work in the facility, when they're all on the same page trying for the same thing. And I think that if you don't, as we learned, you know, when we spent our own time with the implementation process with the 3 homes we were working with in New York, if people are not on the same page, then why is it that you're talking about doing away with a special diet? I mean, one of the I often said, especially in the beginning, it's embarrassing some of the things that we're learning. One of the things that we learned is that the difference between a diabetic diet and a regular diet in nursing home is about this much. But I cannot tell you, I've been working in long-term care for more than 40 years. The number of times you've seen altercations in the dining room because somebody wanted something and they weren't supposed to have it, so they get into a fight with the aide, who is then forced to try to separate the person from something that they want to eat. It's just goofy. And so, but you can't get to doing away with a lot of those special diets if we're not all on the same page, if the families aren't comfortable with it, if the staff isn't comfortable with it. We had to do a lot of the training we did in the beginning was to kind of undo some of the things that had been common practice for years and years and years. And certainly special diet. I mean, the American Diabetes Association almost 20 years ago came out with a paper saying basically people living in long-term care, you know, should have regular diets, that quality of life should be the priority.
Yep.
I always forget the exact title, but the National Association for Dietetics says the same thing. This has been true for a long time. But this is not what's happening in most long-term care facilities. So you get into fights about broccoli, which is about as stupid as it can be now.
Yeah.
And not, of course, if you like broccoli, that's all very well, but this kind of sort of, we wanted to really, and I found you cannot be too concrete in laying out what this really looks like. We hear a lot about the expression person-centered care, and absolutely, we all have an idea in our minds of what that means. But I can also say, and this was true 20 some odd years ago when this movement really started to take hold in long-term care, so many people over and over again would say, yes, but for people with dementia, they can't tell you. Well, they do tell us. And we have found, and the time period between when we wrote the earlier guide for facilities versus this new one, we've learned a lot more about all the ways that people tell us, as Tina so often says, we're all comforts. I mean, we're all experts in our own comfort. And what we're trying to say very loudly is, so is the person with dementia. That doesn't go away. And I think Tina and I had a dinner with a colleague last night who brought this program to her facility. And one of the things that we talked about at dinner was the fact that all of us experience loss. All of us are, in pain and sorrow over that loss, but all of us, we may not be able to control that, but what we want to be able to control is suffering. We do not want the people we love to suffer. And that's what this program really has meant to all of us who've been working on it.
I think for many caregivers, people are confused about the term palliative care versus hospice care. So what is the relationship? What is the difference? How do they?
Easy to get a bit confused. So hospice care really refers to that caregiving practice that is for the last 6 months of life. And we heard our wonderful family member talk about that, how her mom, outlived that period and did outlive that period for a couple of years. But palliative care or comfort focused care is really how all of us choose to live every day. So what do I do for myself that creates comfort for me? And that will be unique to me. Jed will do something else. But really trying to learn what each person's preferences are on a multitude of things, and then being able to incorporate those things into the person's life to create joy. And I want to just second that the whole idea of doing away with suffering, it used to be okay to say, well, they really can't tell us, so we're doing the best that we can. But now that we know that they can clearly show through their actions what works and what doesn't, then it's an opportunity for us to make sense of when something really works, so that we can all live palliative, we can all live in a comfortable way. And what we know is that when people who have trouble thinking are comfortable, that also makes those of us who are their care partners comfortable as well.
I think that one of the most important sort of elements of our experience, and that has gone into both the guides, is that notion. People who work in this field get training very early on in the idea that behavior is communication, but somehow that hasn't translated very well into daily practice. And another example I can give you, apart from the food one, is pain. There is an assumption that a lot of challenging behaviors are a result of the dementia, but it isn't in most cases a result of the dementia. There's something troubling the person. It might be, a sore foot or a sore shoulder or a stomach ache or constipation or their neighbor or whatever, or how they're being approached by whoever it is. The dementia simply means that they cannot explain that to us. And that core principle, when you start to play that out in all the areas, whether it's food or pain or the environment or engagement or sleep, which is a biggie, in all of those areas, when you start to really pay attention to the way that plays out, you can really make a huge impact on people's comfort. And just to give you one sort of very graphic example, when we started with the 3 homes we were working with, all good homes, none of them used a behavior-based pain scale, which meant they were relying on the person, often with advanced dementia, to point to one of the smiley or not smiley faces and tell them exactly what they were feeling. Or what's your pain level between 1 and 10? If any of us were trying to do that, and we know there's incredible diversity in terms of people's own impression of where their own pain is. The other thing that none of them, they all had on their dementia units that people got their pain medication PRN, meaning they had to request it. I mean, that just isn't logical. And one of the things that we learned, and first of all, as one of the older people in the room, I can certainly claim that, you know, you get a lot of aches and pains as you get older, and they tend to be chronic. You know, you don't just wake up one morning and you're a little achy and painy. It's usually at a certain point every morning, you know. So if we know that, then scheduling pain medication as opposed to just waiting for somebody to start moaning and somehow expressing distress. Those are the kinds of differences that we're talking about. And it's really important that family members and friends understand these things as well as staff, so they can work together to figure out what's going on for somebody.
Mhm. As we, you know, what we've said in the past is that in nursing homes, PRN for people with dementia means patient receives none,
That's
no
right.
palliative care, no medication.
And that's true for
no
the
treatment.
hospitals
Yes.
too.
So it's really is a shift. Is there any science behind comfort in terms of, does this affect our brains in any way? Can we, you know, we're always looking for kind of, you know, evidence-based and the data and the research behind this intuitively, and we've seen it work. We know it works, you know, anecdotally. But what is there science? And if so, what is it?
So honestly, the body of knowledge around comfort and the impact that it has on individuals who have Alzheimer's disease or some other kind of dementia dates back to the early 1990s. So there's actually quite a large body of knowledge. It started with the father of person-centered care for people with dementia, Tom Kitwood, out of the UK. And actually it was Tom Kitwood who led us to explore what that value of comfort could look like. And Dr. Kitwood was really focused on not just physical comfort, that's important, but also comfort in mind and soul. Because we know that sometimes when you have trouble thinking, you may feel like a stranger in a strange land, nothing makes sense to you. And that is equally discomfort, just, you know, uncomfortable for the individual. So it began with that. We've been engaged, Care and Kind, Beatitudes Campus, the Comfort Matters program, since 2004, exploring different aspects of creating comfort and really looking at how that comfort is delivered. We continue to explore that now as we try and push this science forward, but we're not alone. There are people all over the country and all over the world who value the aspect of comfort. It was a great joy of mine about 10 years ago, actually, when I got to speak with the amazing Dr. Kolkava, who was a nurse theorist who created the comfort model for nursing. And Dr. Kolkava understood that it wasn't just about relief, like when we take a Tylenol because we've got a headache, but it was really much more about exploring why the person was uncomfortable and addressing those needs in a variety of settings. So there's a great deal of evidence that undergirds this idea of comfort, even though it may sound a little bit loose. But I want to commit to you and to everyone online that we're going to continue to push the envelope on what comfort really looks like. You know, starting with the idea that you sleep when you're tired and you wake when you're not. Perhaps easy to do at home when you're looking at one person, a bit more challenging, but very doable when you're looking at the 40 people who live in a particular neighborhood in a nursing home.
You know, leads me to we've discussed that comfort care is an active process.
Mm.
And I think a lot of people are concerned that it's withholding. You're gonna stop doing something. Can you say more about
I
that?
think that was one of the most important
Mhm.
reasons we wanted to do this guide. The whole idea is that you know, if somebody is declining, and there are active medical interventions that are no longer helpful, but there are still active things you can do. And looking for comfort and working with the staff to look for comfort together is a very different experience than simply watching somebody decline and feeling helpless. And the truth is, you don't have to be, somebody doesn't have to have dementia. You don't have to be with a friend who is dying or who is declining to have that impulse. It's just that we want to make sure that we bring people with dementia into that mix. They belong there too, because it's possible, and we've seen it. And I've watched it. I mean, I went the very first time I walked into the Beatitudes unit. I mean, I knew it immediately. There was a serenity to it that I had just never experienced before. And then when we, you know, brought it here in our homes, all, you know, each in their own way struggled with this. And then there are other homes beyond that we've worked with. It's just astonishing, not just what it does for the residents, but for family members and also for staff over and over and over again. We saw staff. I can still remember one of our early training sessions. There was a LPN on the night shift, and during the break in the training, he walked by me, he was just holding his head. He looked so unhappy. And I said, "What's the matter?" And he said, "You know, there's a woman I walk by every night, and she's always unhappy. She's weepy, she's, you know, she's distressed." He said, "I didn't think there was anything I could do, and now I know there is." And that powerful reaction from staff, even, you know, it took a while. I'm not going to say you can't start on Monday and by Friday you've got it into shape. We had some tough months, you know, getting this not just on the units, but also on the managers. The units were easier than the managers, actually. I will confess that.
And I remember when I went to Phoenix to take a look with the 3 homes that we brought teams of people out, and I spoke to the director of the Beatitudes campus at the time. I don't think she's still there, but and I said to her, "Gee, it's wonderful that you're giving everybody permission to do this." She said, "I'm not giving them permission. I expect it. Everybody is expected. It just becomes the standard of care." And we have a few questions from the chat room, and I'm going to ask Carol if she wants to go around and pick up some questions. If you have questions, you can put them on the index cards. I'd like to just explore a little more about the issue of pain, because I think it's one of the major contributors to discomfort that's often undetected and undertreated. People are afraid of using pain medications. So if you want to just expand on the role of pain and the alleviation of pain as contributing to comfort.
So we'll talk about it from a physical perspective, which in some ways might be a low-lying fruit. The person who has trouble thinking has pain like they always have. You know, so that car accident that they had a couple of years ago, that's still impacting their body. But what they lose many of the time is the ability to verbally communicate that pain. But we can see in their actions. And so that's what drove us to a tool called the Pain Ad. Now, there are many out there, so it doesn't matter which one it is. As long as it's a valid tool, it's been psychometrically tested from a research perspective to tell us what we need to know. But we use this Pain Ad tool to help everyone have a conversation about the individual's pain. Now, by everyone, I do mean everyone. Families are taught how to use a Pain Ad so that we can all have a common conversation about a topic that's pretty complex. The folks who work in the laundry learn people who work in dining. Every different role that you can encounter in the nursing home or assisted living, all learn how to do a pain ad so that we can all talk about what's going on and so we can fix it. Because if we can't recognize physical pain, we can't address its causes. Now, we never just offer medication. It isn't just about that. It's about the non-pharmacologic or non-medication things that are equally important. If I have a headache, it is likely that I am not just going to take some Tylenol. I want to lay down for a few minutes while that Tylenol kicks in. And maybe I want to put a cool compress on my head. People with dementia can't tell us that that's their practice or that's what they've done, but they can show us through the signs in their body when they are uncomfortable. And so it behooves us to take note of that and look at the medication things and the non-medication things that can make that better. It starts by looking at the different illnesses that maybe somebody's been experiencing. So knowing that somebody was in a car accident, or knowing that they have rheumatoid arthritis, or that they have neuropathy, they have issues with their belly, all of those things potentially can lead us to a greater understanding about what's going on. Compare that with our pain ads, that gives us a more complete picture. What we know is that there's been an awful lot in the news about opioid use and how derogatory that can be for an individual. But let me just say that a life lived in physical pain is no life. And so the FDA just loosened their control over some of the medications that have come into question, which is wonderful because we, as a medical community, realized we went a little too far on trying to control those. And we're now able to maybe reintegrate those into some people's care. Now, does everybody need them? No. But when we use that pain ad tool, that behavioral assessment tool, to determine that someone is in pain, if we use all the things that we know that are low level, like Tylenol or ibuprofen, if we use those and they don't work, we need to have other pain medications in our arsenal that potentially can control the pain for the individual, and appropriately so, because all pain is not created equally.
The other thing, and I hope you'll give the toe example, is that people with dementia lose the ability sometimes to sort of perspective-wise, you know, they can't say, well, I'm not doing this very well, but the toe example she gave last night was perfect. Because we all have been aware, if we work in long-term care, people might have broken a hip, and you see absolutely no evidence of their distress, even though they may be in a lot, because they just held it all in. On the other hand, the toe.
I was actually up in the neighborhood where people with trouble thinking live, moderate to advanced in terms of progression. And I'm standing with a colleague who is well known in the dementia world. Her name is Dr. Jerry Hall out of the University of Iowa. And Jerry had come to see the work that we were doing firsthand. And we're maybe 2 or 3 minutes into our conversation about comfort, and we both hear this blood-curdling scream. And we know somebody's in trouble. And as the people who run into the burning building, both of us charge down to find where this person is. And what we discovered was the most lovely expression of comfort that I have probably ever seen or may ever see. We have a CNA with her arms wrapped around the person, laying in the bed next to them, with their toe that they stubbed that now has blood kind of trickling down. And the CNA saying it's going to be okay. Very, very impactful for both Dr. Hall and myself, because we understood that that's where comfort lives.
We, we do have some questions here from our in-person audience and from the chat. So one question which several people have asked is, how can we identify a nursing home or memory care facility that has adopted the comfort model? How can people find that information?
You can go to comfortmatters.org, and we do have a list of participating organizations. And actually, we operate in 11 different states, but never fear. If you have an organization that you have in mind where you would like us to work, we travel, and we are very excited to help others see the value of comfort.
One of the reasons, again, that we did this book is we want more people out there asking for these elements of comfort. If it becomes more of an expectation in the larger public, this will help move other homes forward who've not yet fully embraced this.
You know, I think that there's also a question here from several people about kind of, you know, or a comment that this should really be mandatory. You know, this approach should really be, why aren't we doing it? Why haven't we done this already? Is this a part of the age-friendly, you know, movement that's happening? And New York State was actually just named one of the first age-friendly state, I believe, in the nation. So unfortunately, I think people with dementia are often carved out of that age-friendly component, although I'm on the age-friendly commission, and I try to you know, raise the voice of the person with dementia and their family member. But getting back to that kind of, is it mandatory? Could it be made mandatory? Are there state standards? And I know this is not, you know, it's not national standards really, although there is a nursing home reform movement that's happening on the federal level. And does that reform movement encompass any of these approaches?
The short answer is yes. And yes, it should be mandatory, mainly because we're speaking about how we humanely serve someone. You know, our challenge, and this is all of the people who have dementia, all of the people who care for them, all of the families who are engaged, our challenge is this. Traditional care was informed from a medical perspective. And there are many aspects of that that are great and are necessary. But there are many aspects of dementia care that are not curable or fixable from a medical perspective. And so what we're doing is we're resetting how we think about, how we care for folks, and what we do. And we all know that change is hard, but yes, it should be. What we also know is that, especially in nursing homes, the Center for Medicaid and Medicare Services, everything that we're talking about tonight is in line with the regulations for operating in any state in the country.
So even if you're not following the diabetic diet, yet on the survey from DOH, they might, you know, question that.
Mm-hmm. And there is a dementia-specific survey that we helped CMS write.
But the regulations, and if the surveyor is having a question, if you can demonstrate your documentation and interaction with the staff that this is what the person is comfortable with, what the person wants or needs, then you're okay. It's when you don't pay attention to those things that you get into difficulty. The 1987 nursing home reform law brought absolute full vigilance to the idea that the person should be at the center of care. The difficulty is that it's complicated to reorient to comfort. The law makes it very possible and really talks a lot about quality of life. It comes out of a real focus of a study in the 80s that was done at the Institute of Medicine on the fact that quality of life and quality of care, which should not be a surprise to any of us, is, you know, inextricably integrated. I mean, how can we have good care if we don't have quality of life? I mean, they go together. And so it's all there. But I think over time, for all kinds of reasons, we just have never really finished that process of bringing everybody together. And one of the beauties that I experienced when we brought this to the homes in New York was the level of team that really was incredibly enriched on those units. They began to really, I mean, the housekeepers were, you know, empowered. If they noticed that somebody was rubbing their knee, to let the nurse know because it might be pain. But the nurse was empowered to take the housekeeper seriously. Those things have to go together. It doesn't, you can empower the housekeeper all you want, but if the nurse isn't going to take it seriously, it doesn't work. So what we saw over and over again was a coming together of a staff in a new way. And they talked about how they felt more useful with residents.
You know, we've mentioned the Pain AD, this behavior-based tool. It's in the guide, so you can reference that and learn more about it. So there are several questions here, kind of referencing the past 2 years. So we've gone through, and we're not over yet, as we're all sitting here with masks. The impact of COVID in nursing homes, and we know that it's resulted in a lot of short staffing, I think, in a lot of trauma, both for the residents in nursing homes, for family members who were not allowed to visit and felt very frustrated and cut off from the care, because a visit of a family member in a nursing home is not just a visit, it's often helping, it's active engagement with that individual, helping to feed, to comfort, to even just their presence or that voice can be comforting, and to be cut off from that. And so there's a question here that, you know, kind of how has the COVID experience in nursing homes affected this program and the delivery of this program? And short staffing, how can a CNA practice what we're talking about in terms of comfort care when the past 2 years has resulted in a real workforce shortage?
Can I answer the second part of that
You can
first?
answer it however you like.
So what we know is that when people are comfortable, they require less assistance. So there's this idea that if we are integrating comfort into everything that we do, that it's more time consuming, but it's not. If I help you get cleaned up in a way that makes sense to you, that makes you comfortable, and I don't do things that aggravate or upset you, and you push me away and keep me from doing it, that is a time saver. So there's some misunderstanding from time to time that when we integrate comfort into somebody's experience, that it's going to take more time or more staff. At the Beatitudes campus, we developed a statement a long time ago about working smarter. And when you are integrating comfort into someone's experience, that's a smarter way to look at how we allocate all the tasks that need to get done. And ultimately, it saves time and wear and tear on the person when we're going with them instead of going in the opposite direction. COVID has been rough. And I think any of us who would say otherwise would not be truthful. It has been hard all over the country. I work a lot of different places, and we generally have to commiserate about how rough it was before we can move on and talk about the things that we're doing that will ultimately make things better. But what we have learned through all of this experience is that comfort is even more valuable than we realized. And that some of the things that we likely did in COVID because we did not know better, or because we were trying to save lives, or we were trying to get through something that we had no idea would last for 2 years, that all of those things we learned from. And there are things that we did that we will not do again. I've heard very clearly from CMS that they will not keep families out of nursing homes ever again. That's something that we were able to learn. Now, do we want to learn things that way? No, we do not. But we're going to take what was given to us and we're going to use it to inform how we do things in the future. And it will be better as a result of that.
Thank you. You know, it's, I think the impact, and I think, you know, this is going to have a long resonance for us. You know, it's not over yet. And I think the emotional kind of the communal trauma and the anxiety and the fact that there's a war in Europe that we're seeing every day, you know, just adds to this level of communal distress, actually. So I think it's important for us to remember that it's important for us to find our own comfort and to do that so we can continue to do the work. And if you're a family caregiver, to find that way so that you can continue to provide care. Or if you're a professional caregiver or nursing home or assisted living provider, that it's important also to take care of yourself first. A couple of more questions, and we're going to have to wrap up. There are several questions about how can we learn tips for helping Alzheimer's patients sleep, to be more engaged, how do you care for that? Let me just, those of you who are interested or looking for that information, you can contact Care in Kind. We have a whole host of training. We have a whole bunch of new training materials, and contacting the helpline and getting connected. And we do have some activities actually that we put online during COVID that Nancy Henley, one of our dementia care coaches, put up, because one of the most frequent questions we were getting during COVID, remember, family members were so isolated and so and in many senses, and many were trapped with their person with dementia. There was home care was not coming in. There was no social adult daycare. There were no senior centers. And so Nancy put up, I think, close to a dozen different activity videos. So you can see that on our website under COVID-19 resources. And they're wonderful, and people have really used them. We also have our Connect to Culture program, all of which has everything we do now at Care in Kind is virtual. And the Connect to Culture programs can provide you know, a period of enrichment and engagement and connection, and some respite for the caregiver, and the person with dementia can be involved as well. So I encourage you to take a look at that. We answered the staffing question. Let me, and I answered the pain ad question. What about when people with dementia who you expect to be in pain are not, but are not claiming pain? They're not expressing pain, at least verbally. How would you manage that?
So the value of being able to look at the person's countenance, their face, how they breathe, their body posture, and determine what's going on there, and their consolability. To be able to look at those things can clearly tell us when intervention is necessary. And so the value of a behavioral pain tool is it gives us the power to not use their words. You know, I've had somebody sitting there like this, and I'm like, how you doing? And they're like, oh, I'm fine, honey. Well, I know that the person isn't fine. I know that they've got discomfort, you know, but being able to look at the person from head to toe and make sense of it, and then have a conversation with the medical provider, nurses at the place where the individual lives, that's the best way to be able to determine that pain is present, and then work with the team to figure out what are we going to do about it now. So the value is not just in the recognition, it's the follow-up with what are the approaches that will make this better.
Mm-hmm. It's been a long time that we've been working on this project. What were some of the obstacles? You mentioned some challenges. What were some of them when we were implementing this? And I think we can mention the homes that we've worked with and the homes that currently are you know, involved now. in New York City and in the metro area that we're working with?
Well, the homes that we worked with were Cobble Hill in Brooklyn and Jewish Home on 106th Street and Isabella Geriatric Center. And then it went out the Actors Home in New Jersey is worked with you. And Sarah Newman in Westchester and Kohler, one of the city homes, where we had a really wonderful success. As somebody who worked years ago at HHC, I cannot tell you how happy it made me to be able to bring this to a city facility. I think that the obstacles were one, and I have worked in long-term care a long time, and a concern of mine throughout, as it happens most of that time, has been that things have gotten very compartmentalized. So that there's somebody in charge, and then there's dietary who does dietary, and there's nursing that does nursing. And there's housekeeping that does housekeeping, as if those things don't interact. But in fact, there's nothing that happens in a nursing home or any residential setting that is in the control of any one department. But I think they all could benefit, and our homes did, from working more together, thinking through. Maybe the person isn't sleeping because housekeeping figures the best time to do the floors is at 10 o'clock at night because there's nobody walking up and down the hall. Well, that's all very well, but those rooms where somebody is a light sleeper and can't get to sleep, that person is not having a good night. And then there are a lot of old holdovers, and I don't think we had a big issue with our homes around this, but many homes do. And this is one of those things where for many years, and I think it's important to say that we're compartmentalized, we've learned a lot, but it still hasn't been integrated. It still doesn't get out there. Common practice in nursing home for years was to wake somebody up every 2 hours so that they wouldn't get a decubitus. Well, one of the things that we learned from Sue Ann Gilderman, who was a nurse researcher in Minnesota, who studied first falls, and at the end of her 3-year study, she said, I'm going to do sleep next, because if people don't sleep well, they fall. And she went to an international sleep conference and went into a room where the man on the podium was in a military uniform. And she thought she was in the wrong room, and she went out and checked. She was in the right room. And what was the topic he was going to talk about? What is the most effective way to torture somebody through sleep deprivation? And what do you suppose the answer was? Every 2 hours. Now, nobody in nursing home deliberately wanted to torture anybody. And I think many homes have slowly, gone away from this. But that's an example of we need to learn, we need to integrate, we need to get it out there. And family members, if you are empowered and understand this, can have a different kind of a conversation with the staff in the facility about what's going on. I did a webinar very recently on sleep, and one of the questions that came up, we discussed the fact that when you do a falls assessment in a nursing home, one of the things you should be looking at is what's happening for the person's sleep. And that means you need to be talking all 24 hours to each other. You need to know the person, or our example in the book, Anthony, who was in a lot of distress because people tried to get him to go to sleep at 10 o'clock at night when he was accustomed to staying up until 4. So when did he push people away? Why was he given antipsychotics? Because they were trying to get him to do something he was uncomfortable doing. When they stopped that, when they talked to the wife, found that out, and allowed him to go to bed when he was ready and sleep until he was ready to get up, those antipsychotics disappeared. So this is the kind, it's usually not quite that straightforward, but the issue is you don't get to it if you don't ask the question. And we're really saying with this book and with everything that we're trying to do, keep asking that question. Is this person comfortable? If they're not comfortable, keep asking until you figure out how. Sometimes it's a day, an hour, but you figure it out. And sometimes it can be months, but if you're not asking the question, you don't get there.
And I think, that brings us back to where we started, which is that the person with dementia, even if they're in very advanced stages of the disease, can still lead you to the point of where they are most comfortable and what is going to be appropriate for them and to alleviate the distress. So I want to thank you both for a really wonderful, conversation about something that we don't talk enough about. So thank you for your complete commitment to good care. I mean, this is a lifetime of dedication to this process. So thank you both. I want to thank the Halis and Skolnick families for their support. And before we close, I want to just acknowledge the amazing Caring Kind staff, one of whom just walked out of the room, to Julie, and Alex and Linda, all of whom have helped set this up and make sure that our technology has worked. And I think our owl has worked really well today. So thank you, Mr. Owl. To Carol Byrne, who was the puppet master, kind of pulling all the strings to make sure that this gets done. To Dominic and Alex, who have helped with the admin, and to Ed and to Eleonora, who have, thank you for your participation and your support. And for Marcia, who will be here to answer any questions. Marcia Henney is our MAP program manager, and so please, if you have any questions, you can speak to her or any of our staff. Let me also take this time to remind you that Caring Kind is a nonprofit that is over 90% privately supported. I think a lot of people are surprised when they hear that figure. So we depend on the generous support of our donors and friends like the Halises. And if you're not already a contributor, I ask you to please consider becoming a contributor. You could do that through a one-time gift or through a monthly gift. And Alex Wong, our CFO, will be in the hall if you would like to make a donation. Being a monthly donor ensures a secure base of funding for us, and it makes it easier to give an amount of $10, $20, or $25 a month. So if you're a member of a support group, if you've called the helpline, if you attended an education program or programs like this, I ask you to please consider becoming a monthly supporter. I sound like a PBS or WNYC ad, but it's important. It's what keeps us going. So thank you all. We do have another conference coming up in June, which is our Hispanic conference, which will be in Spanish, but we will have simultaneous translation into English, taking a look at brain health and wellness. And then hopefully in October, we don't have the date quite yet, but we will have our annual meeting on research. And that will, I hope, will be focusing on the science behind keeping our brains healthy. So we're putting that together now. So keep in touch with us and watch on the website and contact the helpline. So thank you all for coming, and hope to see you soon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, and thank you online, those of you who are
Still there.
really appreciate your attention. We tried to keep it to an hour, because I know that more than an hour online.
It's a pleasure. This was great. I'm glad to.
I'm gonna give them to
That was excellent.
Julie, thank you so
You're
much.
welcome,
you,
Carol.
Julie.
You're welcome.
I'm-